To survive in medieval castles, people use secrets that are not written about in history textbooks. But now it's time to reveal details that are sure to shock you. We are used to seeing medieval castles as a romantic symbol of a bygone era, a place of knightly tournaments and court balls. We imagine that life in them was filled with nobility and grandeur. But behind the cold stone walls lay a completely different reality, a harsh, daily struggle for survival. These buildings were not fairy tale decorations, but ingeniously designed machines for living, where every element of architecture had its own specific, vital function. From the design of the toilet to the shape of the window openings, everything was subordinated to one goal: to protect its inhabitants from the harsh world. This is not a story about kings and battles, but about the hidden engineering that allowed people to simply live to see the next morning. Watch this video to the end, and you'll learn how the direction of a spiral staircase could determine the outcome of an assault, why corridors were rare, and how an ordinary wall could serve as both a wardrobe and a heating system. What if I told you that the most important but overlooked secret to comfortable survival in a medieval castle was literally hidden in an ordinary toilet? The medieval toilet, or French-style wardrobe, was not just a primitive outhouse for relieving oneself, but a true marvel of engineering and ingenuity that performed several unexpected and vital functions at once. Its sophisticated design was carefully thought out down to the smallest detail to ensure the hygiene of the population and the safety of the castle. It was a comprehensive engineering approach to solving a sanitary problem that was not appreciated by contemporaries. The closets were strategically located inside the thick outer walls of the castle, consisting of small stone niches with wooden seats. The toilet hole in the floor led to a long, vertical stone shaft that descended and exited at the base of the wall, often directly into a moat with running water or a ravine. This ingenious system used gravity to efficiently remove all waste from the living quarters to the outside without any effort, which was a real revolutionary breakthrough in sanitation at a time when most people relieved themselves in chamber pots. This dramatically improved the hygienic conditions in the castle and prevented the accumulation of sewage inside the walls, which could have led to epidemics. The vertical shaft of the wardrobe itself naturally created a constant upward draft of air from the bottom up, functioning as a primitive but surprisingly effective ventilation system for the rooms. This significantly helped to get rid of unpleasant odors inside the living quarters of the castle by removing them outside. In addition, the acrid ammonia fumes that constantly rose up the narrow shaft from the feces intensely saturated the expensive clothing and fabrics that were often deliberately stored in the adjacent niches of the wardrobe. And this chemically helped to effectively get rid of insect pests such as moths. Ammonia was a natural insecticide that repelled parasites, making the wardrobe an ideal place to store valuable wool and fur items. In addition to its main hygienic function, the wardrobe unexpectedly played an important defensive role in wartime. The shafts were deliberately made too narrow in diameter so that enemy soldiers could not physically climb through them into the castle from below. But the castle's defenders could cleverly use them to effectively drop heavy stones, boiling tar, or other unpleasant substances directly onto the heads of unsuspecting besiegers below. This made the foot of the walls directly below the guard robes a particularly dangerous and avoidable place for an assault. Enemies tried to bypass these areas, knowing the risk of being doused with filth or having a stone dropped on their heads. Interestingly, the word wardrobe itself etymologically comes from the Old French garde-robe, which literally means to keep, to preserve a dress, clothing. This is linguistically related to the practical fact that small toilet wardrobe rooms were often deliberately used as storage closets. Ammonia from sewage, as mentioned above, effectively repelled moths and other textile pests, preserving expensive woolen and fur clothing intact for many years. The smell was unpleasant, but the price of preserving clothing was worth the discomfort in an era when clothing was of enormous value. The design and number of wardrobes was also a clear indicator of the material status and wealth of the castle owner in society.
We need to discuss the
In wealthy aristocratic fortresses,
Indeed, my lord.
there could be several dozen such facilities, serving different levels of the building and numerous rooms of the inhabitants. Sometimes they were strategically built in pairs next to each other, so that the lord and lady could use them simultaneously in privacy, discussing important family matters and court intrigues. The number of toilets was a measure of prestige on a par with the size of the castle and the richness of the decoration of the halls. However, this ingenious system had serious tactical disadvantages in wartime. During a siege of the castle, if the enemy got close to the base of the wall under the wardrobe, they could strategically light a large fire with wet wood at the bottom of the shaft, and acrid, suffocating smoke would fill the inner chambers through the opening, smoking out the inhabitants. This was one of the known vulnerabilities of the design that had to be taken into account and compensated for when planning the castle's defense. Some castles had dampers to close the shafts in case of such a smoke attack. Despite these shortcomings, the garderobe was a huge progressive step forward in sanitation compared to more primitive, unsanitary methods of waste disposal. It clearly demonstrates to modern historians how inventive and practical medieval builders and architects were in solving complex everyday hygiene problems with limited technology. Their main goal was to create the most comfortable and safe living environment possible in the very uncomfortable, cruel, and unsanitary world of the Middle Ages, where disease ravaged the population. These seemingly insignificant and inconspicuous architectural details were in fact the valuable result of centuries of practical experience in survival by generations of builders. Every design decision in a castle was strictly dictated by harsh necessity, not aesthetics. Medieval builders did not create abstract beauty in our modern artistic understanding of art, but above all, practical functionality and utility, on which the life, health, and survival of the castle's inhabitants depended in conditions of constant threat. Do you personally agree with this statement, or do you have a different opinion?
But consider the
Please tell us in detail what you think about this interesting topic. Do you think this wardrobe system was a brilliant engineering solution for its time, given the technology available? Or was it simply a necessary temporary measure born of desperation? Write your opinion in the comments below. Are you ready to learn the truth about why there were almost no corridors in medieval castles? The answer lies in the central element of any castle or estate, the Great Hall. It was not just a room for feasts, but a multifunctional space that served as the center of all social life. The Great Hall was the heart of the castle, its main communication hub. All paths led through it, connecting the kitchen, bedrooms, chapel, and outer courtyards. The absence of corridors meant that the lives of every inhabitant were visible, which helped to strengthen community and control.
Let's begin at once.
It was here that the Lord received his vassals, held court, and hosted receptions. During the day, the hall was filled with light from the tall windows, and in the evenings it was lit by torches and a large central hearth. This hearth was the only source of heat, and all the inhabitants of the castle gathered around it. The hearth was located right in the middle of the hall, and the smoke escaped through a special opening in the roof called a louver. This system was not very effective, so the walls and ceiling of the hall were often covered with a thick layer of soot. The air was heavy and smoky, but it was a small price to pay for the saving warmth. To combat drafts and the cold emanating from the stone walls, they were hung with heavy tapestries. These works of art served not only as decoration, but also as an important element of insulation. They created a more comfortable atmosphere and helped to keep the heat inside the room. The Great Hall was not only used for work, but also for eating. Long folding tables and benches were set up for meals and removed afterwards to free up space. This allowed the hall to be quickly transformed for different needs, whether it was dancing or accommodating soldiers for the night. Privacy, as we understand it, did not exist. At night, after the Lord and his family retired to their chambers, servants and soldiers spread straw mattresses on the floor and slept right there in the Great Hall. It was the warmest and safest place in the entire castle. The seating arrangement at the table during a feast was strictly regulated. The Lord and the most honored guests sat on a raised platform at the main table, while the rest sat at long tables below. This clearly demonstrated the social hierarchy of medieval society. The architecture of the Great Hall was designed to impress. High ceilings with exposed wooden beams, huge windows, security permitting, and massive stone walls were meant to emphasize the power and wealth of the owner. It was the public face of his power. But if the great halls were so smoky and crowded, where did the Lord and his family find privacy and security? The answer lies in a unique design that you have probably never heard of. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of medieval lords. In a world where personal space was an almost unthinkable luxury, there was one special room reserved exclusively for the castle owner's family, the solar. It was the first living room and bedroom in history rolled into one. The solar was usually located on the top floor, above the Great Hall, which provided additional heat rising from the hearth below. It was the most comfortable and protected place in the entire fortress. Here the Lord could take a break from the hustle and bustle, spend time with his family, or discuss important matters with trusted advisors.
We must consider the northern border, my lord.
Unlike the smoky Great Hall, the solar often had its own fireplace built into the wall. This was a much more efficient and cleaner heating solution than an open hearth. The smoke went up the chimney, leaving the air in the room clean, which was a sign of high status. The windows in the solar were also larger and could be glazed, which was an incredible luxury. Glass was very expensive, and only the wealthiest feudal lords could afford it. It filled the room with light and allowed them to admire the view of their estates. It was in the solar that the most valuable items were kept: documents, jewelry, and books. It was a private space where outsiders were strictly forbidden. Here, ladies did needlework, and children received their first lessons in literacy.
As he commanded.
But the solar also concealed other, far more intriguing secrets. Often, secret passages and hidden staircases began in this room. These hidden paths allowed the owner of the castle to move around their estate unnoticed, avoiding prying eyes. Such passages could lead to the chapel, the fortress walls, or the cellars. They were necessary in case of siege, providing a secret route for retreat or for organizing a sudden sortie. Knowledge of these passages was a closely guarded secret, passed down from father to son. Some secret passages had a more insidious purpose. They could lead to hidden observation holes that opened onto the Great Hall. Through them, the Lord could eavesdrop on the conversations of his guests or vassals, always staying abreast of what was happening.
I tell you, this new harvest
These ears of the
grapes is
castle were
finest
an
in a
important tool of
decade.
power. They allowed conspiracies to be uncovered and the loyalty of subordinates to be tested. Guests feasting in the hall had no idea that their
seems the
words were
harvest
being
reports are
closely
favorable this
monitored
season.
from the darkness of the secret corridor. Thus, the solar was not just a room, but the center of control for the castle. Both overt and covert, it combined comfort, security, and tools of covert control. This evolution from a common hall to private chambers was the first step toward our modern understanding of the home. What if I showed you a time machine that would take us to the most vulnerable spot in any castle? But first, let's understand how its main defense worked. The walls. A medieval fortress was like a stone onion, consisting of several layers of defense, each layer carefully thought out. The main principle of defense was echeloning. If the enemy captured the first line of walls, the defenders retreated to the second, continuing their resistance. This system of concentric walls allowed a small group of warriors to hold back a significantly superior enemy force.
Prepare for the next wave.
The walls themselves were not just a pile of stones. They were built of two parallel layers, and the space between them was filled with rubble, broken stone, and mortar. This construction was extremely strong and could withstand the blows of battering rams and catapults. The top of the wall was crowned with battlements or merlons, behind which the defenders took cover. The gaps between the battlements, called crenellations, were used for shooting. This simple system allowed archers to fire while remaining under the protection of stone and quickly hide to reload. But the real genius of engineering was the loopholes, or embrasures. These were narrow vertical slits in the walls through which archers could safely shoot at the besiegers. Their shape and location were the result of precise calculations to ensure maximum effectiveness. The inside of the embrasure was much wider than the outside. This gave the archer room to maneuver and allowed him to fire over a wide area while remaining virtually invulnerable to return fire. The narrow outer slit was a very difficult target for enemy archers. Over time, the shape of the loopholes became more complex. Cross-shaped slits appeared, which made it possible to fire not only straight ahead, but also downwards at enemies who had approached the very base of the wall. Every detail was designed to increase the defenders' safety and the effectiveness of their fire. The thickness of the walls was also of strategic importance. They were wide enough to allow battlements to pass along their top, enabling defenders to move quickly between different sections of the defense. Sometimes hidden galleries and rooms were even built inside the walls. The construction of such walls was an incredibly laborious and costly process that took decades. Thousands of workers labored to quarry stone, prepare mortar, and lay bricks. Each castle was a monument not only to military power, but also to a colossal economic investment. But no matter how thick the walls were, every fortress had a weak spot that required ingenious engineering solutions. In the next chapter, we will look at how the heart of any defense was protected, the gate. The main and most vulnerable point of any fortress has always been the entrance. It was precisely for its defense that the most ingenious and sophisticated engineering solutions were devised. The gate tower, or barbican, was not just a gate, but a multi-layered, deadly trap designed to destroy anyone who tried to cut through. The first obstacle in the enemy's path was a drawbridge spanning the moat. The bridge mechanism was controlled from the gate tower and allowed it to be raised instantly, cutting off the path to the gate. This was the first and most obvious line of defense. If the enemy managed to cross the moat, they encountered the first grate, called a portcullis. It was made of thick wooden beams reinforced with iron and was lowered from a special niche in the ceiling. Its massive weight could stop any onslaught. Often there were several such grills in the gate tower, located one after the other. After breaking through the first one, the attackers found themselves in a small enclosed space, the so-called stone bag. At this moment, a second grill could be lowered behind them, trapping them inside. The ceiling of this bag was dotted with special holes. Through them, the defenders of the castle, who were safe on the upper floors of the tower, could throw stones at the heads of their enemies, pour hot sand on them, or simply shoot them with bows. It was impossible to hide in this enclosed space. The gates themselves were made of several layers of oak planks covered with iron to make them difficult to set on fire or break down. They were locked from the inside with massive wooden and metal bolts. Breaking through such a structure was practically impossible. The gate tower was not just a passageway, but a full-fledged defensive structure. It housed a garrison and had food and ammunition stores. This allowed the gate to be defended even if the rest of the castle walls were captured. The entire architecture of this structure was designed to lure the enemy into a trap and destroy them. Narrow passages slowed down movement, turns prevented the use of battering rams, and multi-level protection allowed damage to be inflicted from different directions. It was a real defense machine. Sometimes an additional fortification called a barbican was built in front of the main gate tower. It extended the line of defense beyond the main walls and forced the enemy to storm the gate under crossfire from the walls. The passage through the barbican was often designed as a maze. Thus, storming the gate was the most difficult and risky undertaking for any army. The defenders used all the advantages of architecture to turn the most vulnerable part of the castle into the most deadly. The genius of medieval engineers turned stone into an insurmountable obstacle.
This gate will stand for centuries.
Are you ready for the shocking truth about what ordinary people actually built their houses from? Before we get to that, let's talk about the most valuable resource of the Middle Ages: water. Without a reliable source of water, no castle could withstand a long siege, so its storage and protection were given top priority. The most reliable source was a well dug inside the fortress walls. They tried to locate it in the most protected place, most often in the inner courtyard of the citadel or even inside the main tower. The donjon. This guaranteed access to water even if the outer fortifications were captured. Digging such a well was an incredibly difficult task. Often it was necessary to break through dozens of meters of rock to reach the aquifer. The work was done by hand and could take several years, but the security was worth it.
Almost there.
The well was not just a hole. Its walls were carefully lined with stone to prevent collapse and contamination. A canopy was built on top, and a lifting mechanism was installed to make it easy to retrieve water. In addition to wells, cisterns were often built in castles to collect rainwater. These were large underground reservoirs lined with stone and covered with a waterproof solution. Water from the roofs of towers and buildings flowed into these reservoirs through special gutters. The quality of the water in the cisterns was lower than in the wells, so it was mainly used for technical needs. However, if the well dried up or was poisoned by the enemy, it became the last chance for survival. Sometimes special fish were put into the cisterns to purify the water.
Push those ladders!
Water was used not only for drinking, but also as an element of defense. A wide and deep moat filled with water was a serious obstacle for assault ladders and siege towers. Overcoming it under fire from the walls was a very difficult task. The water level in the moat could be regulated by a system of sluices if there was a river nearby. This made it possible to drain the moat for cleaning at the right moment, or conversely, to quickly flood it when the enemy approached. Water management was an important element of military engineering. Some castles built on rivers or lakes had complex water supply systems. Water could be supplied inside through lead or wooden pipes, driving a mill or filling internal pools. This was a sign of particular wealth and engineering skill. A reliable source of water was the foundation of a castle's life and independence. Without it, even the thickest walls and tallest towers were useless. That is why wells were guarded as carefully as the Lord's treasury. But castles were home to only a few. How did millions of ordinary people survive in their modest dwellings? In the next chapter, we will descend from the stone walls into the world of wood, clay, and straw. The dwelling of a simple medieval peasant was extremely simple, ascetic, and functional, built from the most accessible, free materials available in the surrounding area. The basis of the house's construction was a wooden frame made of thick beams of oak or other durable wood. This common construction method, known as half timbering or timber framing, allowed for the construction of relatively strong and durable buildings without the use of expensive processed materials or nails. The frame was the skeleton of the house to which everything else was attached, and its strength determined the service life of the entire structure. The space between the vertical and horizontal beams of the frame was carefully filled with wattle, a latticework patiently made from flexible thin branches of willow or hazel growing by the river. This woven latticework was then tightly coated on both sides with a sticky mixture of clay, chopped straw, and cow manure for binding. This ancient technology, called wattle and daub in English, created surprisingly warm and well-insulated walls at minimal cost. Manure added strength and acted as a binder, although it seems unhygienic to us. For peasants, it was an affordable material. Once completely dried in the sun, the clay walls became quite hard and durable, but they had to be regularly renewed and whitewashed with slaked lime every year or two due to erosion. Lime not only gave poor houses a neat, well-kept appearance on the outside, but also served as an effective natural disinfectant against mold and parasites. The characteristic white houses with contrasting dark beams, which we romantically associate with the Middle Ages on postcards, were a direct result of this practical construction technology honed over centuries. The roof of the house was most often covered with a thick layer of rye or wheat straw or reeds from the marshes. A thick layer of tightly packed straw, up to half a meter thick, served as an excellent natural insulator, effectively retaining precious heat inside in winter and pleasant coolness in summer during the heat. However, such a thatched roof was extremely, catastrophically fire hazardous, and a single accidental spark from the hearth could instantly destroy the entire structure in minutes. Fires were a constant threat and often destroyed entire villages as the fire spread from roof to roof. Inside a typical peasant house usually consisted of one large common room without partitions, which served as a kitchen for cooking, a living room for entertaining, and a bedroom for the entire large family, including children. The floors were simply packed earth without any covering, sometimes regularly sprinkled with a layer of fresh straw for minimal warmth and the illusion of cleanliness.
We help each other.
There was very little furniture due to poverty, a rough wooden table, a few primitive benches, and wooden chests for storing meager belongings and clothing. Beds as such were rare. People slept on straw mattresses on the floor or on wooden platforms along the walls. The heart and center of the house was an open hearth, strategically located in the center of the only room on a stone foundation. All food was constantly cooked on it in a cauldron, and it was the only source of heat and light for the family. The vast majority of poor peasant houses simply did not have a chimney due to its high cost, and the acrid smoke escaped through a special opening in the thatched roof, or simply through open windows and doors, creating a draft. It was a primitive but effective solution to the problem of smoke removal without complex structures that were only available to the rich. Due to the constant smoke inside, the walls and ceiling were blackened year-round by a thick layer of soot and grime, and the air in the cramped space was constantly acrid, smoky, and difficult to breathe. This was extremely harmful to the health of the lungs and eyes of all inhabitants, causing illness, but there was simply no alternative for the poor. People were forced to get used to living and breathing in such an aggressive atmosphere from early childhood, knowing no other way, and their bodies adapted, although their life expectancy was short. The windows in the house were deliberately small and narrow slits in order to retain as much heat as possible inside and not let it escape outside. Of course, there was no expensive glass in them. Only very rich people could afford it. The windows were simply covered with wooden shutters, oiled fabric for transparency, or finely crafted animal skins. Because of this forced solution, even on a clear sunny day, the interior of the house was filled with oppressive gloom, and the eyes were constantly strained. Light was a luxury unavailable to poor peasants, who were forced to choose between light and warmth. Often, to save space and heat, valuable domestic animals, cows, pigs, goats, lived under the same roof with people in the same room, separated from them only by a symbolic thin wooden partition, or without any partition at all. This may seem extremely unsanitary and disgusting to us modern people, but the heat emitted by large animal bodies significantly helped to additionally heat people's homes in harsh, deadly cold winters for free. Every calorie of precious heat was literally counted for survival, and living next to animals was a lesser evil than freezing to death on a cold night. Despite their extreme simplicity, primitiveness, and apparent fragility, such peasant houses were surprisingly well adapted to the harsh realities of life and climate. They were extremely cheap to build initially from readily available materials, warm enough for survival, and could be relatively easily repaired by the family themselves without hiring expensive specialists. It was a forced architectural solution, literally born out of extreme poverty and need, but methodically refined over many centuries of practical experience of survival in conditions of feudalism and limited resources. Life in a medieval city dictated its own architectural laws. Land inside the city walls was incredibly expensive, so houses grew not in width but in height. A typical city house was a narrow and tall 3- or 4-story building. Like peasant houses, they were built using frame technology. However, due to the high density of buildings, the main threat in the city was fire. Fires could destroy entire neighborhoods, spreading from one wooden house to another. To combat this in some way, city authorities issued special decrees. For example, it was forbidden to cover roofs with straw, prescribing the use of more expensive but non-combustible tiles or slate. Sometimes they also required stone walls facing neighboring plots. One of the most recognizable features of medieval townhouses was the overhanging upper floors, or bay windows. Each subsequent floor protruded above the previous one, hanging over the narrow street. This was a clever trick that allowed the living space of the house to be increased without going beyond the foundation on the first floor. This architecture resulted in very dark and narrow streets. On the upper floors of neighboring houses, you could literally reach out and touch each other. This created a closed but cozy space, protected from the wind. The ground floor usually housed a shop or craftsman's workshop that opened directly onto the street. Large shutters were open during the day, turning into a counter. The family lived on the upper floors. The second floor housed the main room, similar to the Great Hall in a castle. This is where the family ate, worked, and received guests. The third and fourth floors housed bedrooms and storage rooms. Sanitary conditions in cities were difficult. Wardrobes in city houses often opened onto the backyard or directly onto the street. Waste accumulated in cesspools or simply flowed into sewers along the streets. Despite the overcrowding and lack of hygiene, city houses were the center of progress. This is where craftsmen, merchants, and scientists lived. The architecture of these buildings reflected the dynamic and turbulent life of a medieval city, striving to squeeze the most out of every piece of expensive land. The construction of the houses also contributed to social cohesion. Neighbors lived very close to each other, knew everything about each other, and in case of trouble, such as a fire, came to each other's aid. The city was a single organism, and its architecture reflected this unity. The two main problems that the inhabitants of medieval buildings constantly faced were cold and darkness. It is difficult for modern people to imagine life in constant semi-darkness and the piercing cold of stone walls. All architectural solutions were aimed in one way or another at combating these two elements. The main enemy of warmth was the huge stone walls of the castle. In summer, they provided welcome coolness, but in winter, they became a source of constant cold. To insulate the living quarters, the walls were hung with thick woolen tapestries on the inside. The tapestries not only decorated the interior, but also created an air gap between the cold wall and the room, significantly reducing heat loss. In wealthier houses and castles, the walls could be covered with wooden panels. Wood is much warmer to the touch than stone and serves as a good insulator. Windows were another source of cold. They were small and few in number, especially on the lower floors, for security reasons. In simple houses, window openings were covered with wooden shutters, which were tightly closed at night to keep out the cold air. Glass was incredibly expensive and was used only in churches and the palaces of the wealthiest nobles. Ordinary people used cheaper alternatives. For example, openings could be covered with oiled cloth, parchment, or thin plates of horn, which let in a little dim light but protected from the wind. The main source of light and heat was fire. In castles, these were large fireplaces, and in simple houses, open hearths. They burned almost constantly, but only provided heat in the immediate vicinity, leaving the corners of rooms cold and damp. For additional lighting, tallow candles made from animal fat were used. They smoked heavily and smelled unpleasant, but were the most affordable source of light. More expensive wax candles, which burned cleanly and brightly, could only be afforded by the church and the nobility. The floors in castles were made of stone, and to insulate them, a thick layer of straw or dry grass was laid on the floor. This layer was changed regularly, but it was still a source of dust and insects. In later periods, floors began to be covered with carpets brought from the east. Beds were real fortresses in the fight against the cold. They were made tall, with massive wooden frames and a thick canopy on top. Heavy curtains were drawn on all sides at night, creating a small enclosed space that was warmed by the heat of the sleeping people. All of life was governed by daylight. People rose at dawn and went to bed shortly after sunset, as it was difficult to work or do business by the dim light of candles. The medieval world was much darker and colder than ours, and architecture was just one tool in the eternal struggle for survival. In the medieval world, the Catholic Church was not just a modest place for prayer and worship, but also the absolute center of social life for the entire community, and in difficult and dangerous times, the last reliable refuge for the population. Its thoughtful architecture clearly reflected this critical dual function. It was both a holy house of God on earth and a practical fortress to protect his defenseless flock from enemies. Built of durable stone, it was the most durable, sturdy, and reliable building in any settlement, from village to city, towering above the fragile wooden houses of mortals. Unlike the short-lived wooden houses of poor peasants, which lasted for 1 or 2 generations, churches were deliberately built to last for centuries and millennia to come. Its massive, thick stone walls were almost completely invulnerable to destructive fire, the main deadly scourge of medieval towns and villages, where fires destroyed entire neighborhoods. During a sudden fire in a settlement, panicked people instinctively carried all their most valuable possessions and treasures to the church, knowing from experience that only here, behind the stone walls of the temple, would they be guaranteed safety from the flames. The church was an island of safety in a sea of fire and chaos.
Wait, everyone, quickly now.
During enemy raids by robbers or armies, the church instantly turned into a real defensive citadel for the civilian population. Thick, impenetrable stone walls, narrow, strategically high-placed loopholes, and heavy, massive, iron-bound doors with bolts made it an excellent defensive structure against enemies. The entire frightened population of the village, including the elderly and children, could take refuge and barricade themselves behind its protective walls and wait out the mortal danger in relative safety while the enemy looted and burned houses outside. The right of asylum in the church was sacred and was usually respected even by enemies. The tall bell tower of the church, towering over the surrounding area, served not only to regularly summon the faithful to Mass with the ringing of bells, but also as an effective observation tower and guard post. From its considerable height of tens of meters, a vigilant watchman could spot enemy cavalry approaching from miles away, or the ominous smoke of a fire starting in a neighboring village. The alarming sound of the alarm bell, ringing in a special rhythm, was a recognizable signal of mortal danger, an alarm for the entire area within a radius of many kilometers, warning people of trouble and giving them time to prepare. Inside the church, there was always a mysterious twilight and gloom, even during the day, deliberately created by the dim light that barely penetrated through the few narrow windows in the thick walls. These distinctive windows, similar in shape to the defensive loopholes of castles, were strategically placed high above ground level, so that it was impossible to look inside from the outside or for an enemy to climb through them. Expensive stained glass windows depicting scenes from the Bible were often inserted into them, which not only richly decorated the temple and taught illiterate parishioners, but also further darkened the gloomy interior, creating a mystical atmosphere of divine presence. The majestic architecture of the church was filled with deep Christian symbolism at every level, but it also had critical practical engineering significance for its strength. The high vaulted ceilings of the nave gave parishioners a sense of space, freedom, and divine grandeur, pointing toward the heavens, but also made the entire building structurally very strong, stable, and durable thanks to the distribution of loads. Stone-arched vaults, unlike the primitive wooden ceilings of peasant houses, could not physically burn in a fire, providing eternal protection to the shrines and people inside, even if a fire raged outside. The church was also a kind of unique community center and gathering place for the village or neighborhood. Within its sacred walls, community meetings could be held regularly to discuss important issues. Trade deals could be concluded honestly under oath, and even local justice could be solemnly administered by the elders. In the spacious vestibule of the church, right at the entrance, there was often a single primitive school for teaching children to read and write, run by the local priest or monk, the only literate person in the area.
These early church schools were the seeds of education in medieval society, offering rare opportunities for literacy.
Traditionally, a large cemetery was located around the church, which was considered sacred consecrated ground under the protection of God. Deeply religious people sincerely believed that those buried as close as possible to the walls of the temple or inside it would get to heaven faster and easier after the Last Judgment. This was the most honorable and safest place for the final resting place of the body before resurrection. Proximity to the church, even after death, was a sign of the status and piety of the deceased. The church was the largest, most majestic, and impressive building that a simple, uneducated person who had never left his native village could see in his short life. It rose dramatically above the poor, low huts of the peasants, powerfully symbolizing not only the unshakable divine power in heaven, but also earthly stability, protection, and hope for the best in this world. It was an indestructible stone anchor of order and faith in the turbulent, cruel, and dangerous sea of the Middle Ages, where everything else was impermanent and destroyed by time. Thus, the sacred, spiritual, and the utilitarian practical in medieval church architecture were inextricably and organically linked and intertwined. The majestic city cathedrals and modest rural churches were not just abstract places of religious worship for the soul. They were real stone arcs of salvation that vitally helped people survive both spiritually through faith and physically through protection in a dangerous world full of threats. We could see that medieval buildings were much more complex than they appear at first glance. Every stone, every beam, every architectural detail was part of a complex system of survival, honed by centuries of trial and error. Behind the romantic facades of castles and cathedrals lies a history of ingenious engineering aimed at solving the most pressing problems: how to keep warm, how to defend against enemies, and how to live another day. These buildings teach us that architecture is not only an art, but also a response to environmental challenges. They are silent witnesses to an era when a house was not just a place to live, but an active ally in the daily struggle. By studying their secrets, we gain a better understanding not only of history, but also of ourselves. What other secrets of the past would you like to uncover? Perhaps you are interested in the secrets of survival in other eras, or the engineering wonders of ancient civilizations. Suggest topics for future videos in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new research.